Hi everyone, welcome to Saturday Night SQL Virtual Group webinar. My name is Sarah Huang. I'm the founder and organizer of this virtual group. Today, Anthony Bach will present Power BI What If Parameters. Anthony is a data platform MVP and also the Power BI user group leader for Victoria, BC, Canada. He has presented at multiple events such as Build 2017 and Power BI World Tour 2017. Anthony led the development of an award-winning AI solution and won an important an Impact Award and 2 CDN awards. Anthony has worked in IT for over 15 years and leads a team of over 20 data professionals with millions in annual revenues. He's interested in business intelligence, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Basically, anything that makes data interesting. We really appreciate Anthony shares his knowledge with us on Saturday evening. Let me first go through a few housekeeping things of the past, then transfer the screen over to Anthony. If possible, I would highly encourage you to attend the PASS Summit to grow your career. PASS Summit is the largest conference for data professionals using Microsoft platform. And you'll get deep dive technical sessions, best practices, and new tips and tricks. There are over 100 sessions have been released for PASS Summit 2018. It'll be held on November 6th through 9th and in Seattle, Washington. This is the registration offer. As a Saturday Night SQL Virtual Group member, you can save $150 of your registration fee by using the code VG here, VGDISP9II. For this month's Facebook Live, the pop-up expert is Danny Cherry. It'll be held on July 25th. So in August, PASS will launch DBA Developer and BI PASS Inside newsletters. If you would like to subscribe, you can go to pass.org and sign in to find My PASS, then update your subscription there. PASS launched Knowledge Partner Program. This program will help us to strengthen and grow our relationships with partners by enabling them to contribute industry-leading educational contents with a minimal financial and time commitments. PASS is still looking to connect with new sponsors. You will get a $100 gift card for any referrals leading to community sponsorship. And PASS also has a career center for job hunters and employers. You can visit pass.org/careers to get more information. These are the upcoming virtual group webinars by Business Intelligence Virtual Group and the Database Administration Business Analytics, our virtual group, which is Saturday Night SQL on August 11th, and also Women in Technology, High Availability and Disaster Recovery, and DBA Fundamentals. And PASS has many virtual groups, and you feel free to join as many as you would like. And of course, as always, you are more than welcome to join our virtual group, which is here, Saturday Night SQL. These are the upcoming SQL Saturdays from here down. And probably most of you already joined past. You can join past to grow your career through online education contents, live webinars, in-person meetups, and networking and speaking opportunities. This is how you may connect with past through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And this is how you may ask questions during our session. You can either interact with Anthony directly by click this little hand sign. I'll unmute you so you can ask questions directly, or you can type your question in this chat window, then I'll read it out to Anthony. We really appreciate Anthony spend his time to share his knowledge, and this session will be recorded. Now I'm gonna transfer the screen over to Anthony. All right, Anthony, take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sarah. All right, so as Sarah mentioned, my name is Anthony Bulk. I'm a data platform MVP. And today we're going to be talking about what if parameters inside of Power BI. So I have just a couple of slides here just to kind of set the context, and then I'm going to go into a demo. But so one of the things I wanted to cover is, situations in which you might use what if parameters. So, if you have a data set that has a lot of variability to it, and you have a rough understanding of what the influences are to that data set, that's a good candidate to use what if parameters. And it's also a great way to start to visualize different scenarios so that you can better understand how those will impact your business or your decision making. And you can explore new possibilities. You can alter the measures to see how they might change based on different hypothetical conditions. And the nice thing is, when you use this capability in Power BI, it's just generating DAX code for you. So you can refine it and modify it to meet your needs. So you can even do things like starting to stitch them together to kind of essentially have cascading, what if scenarios essentially. And I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I will touch on it today. You can also integrate, the what if data into R. So you can start to play around with, the different visualization capabilities in R, but also do some predictive analytics. So you could, train a linear regression model and see how, the predictions will play out based on different scenarios. And it's also a really good way to allow, regular business users to modify the data. They don't have to worry about going back to the source system and, modifying the source data. They can essentially just play with different slicers on the canvas of the report and see how the data changes and how the visualizations change. So I'm now going to jump over to a demo. So here I have a Power BI report that's pulling some Winter Olympics data from 2018. I'm just pulling it from Wikipedia. I've created, I'll flip to my data sets here. So essentially we have, 3 queries. They're related through the country. We have this medal table, which lets you know, okay, how many medals did each country get? And then we also have information regarding population and GDP. And then I have this one additional table here, which is the number of athletes by country. I'm just using it to help, you'll see later on with one of my scenarios. It's not connected right now, but it's also a good way to further kind of extend what I'm demoing today, if you want to try this out yourself. And you can follow this. I've detailed this in a blog series on LinkedIn, so you can look this up and you can follow all the steps and even play around with it yourself. So I'll flip back to my report. So here we have a simple report. It gives me a breakdown of the number of gold, silver, and bronze metals, and you can see that the chart updates based on my selections. Again, all that interactive capability comes out of the box with Power BI because I have relationships defined. And I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about the capabilities of Power BI. I want to focus more on the specific what-if analysis feature. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have this ranking essentially of countries by the number of metals that they have. And this is nice and interesting and all. It's it's nice to know that Norway has the most and Canada came in third and the States fourth. But a lot of people kind of say, well, GDP influences a lot with regards to how many metals. It's more kind of indicative of their ranking. How many people they send, how much population they have, how much GDP they produce, right? So I'm going to change and modify this graph. Instead of looking at the number of metals, I'm going to open up my my table here, and I'm going to use the metals per GDP. So this is just a simple DAX calculation. I'm using the SumX function to basically go through every row within the metal table and divide the metal count by the related GDP for each country. So I'm going to drop that in by the values area here. I'm going to get rid of the metal count. And you can see now, that the distribution of values is a bit different, right? Norway, Belarus, Slovenia are kind of in the top now, and US is actually quite a bit of the ways down. Canada's kind of in the middle here, right? So it's a different view of the data, maybe a different way to kind of look at ranking. Now you might imagine a scenario where it's like, oh, I'd like to see how a change in GDP affects the rankings, the metal rankings. So this is a great candidate for what if parameters. So the first thing I'm going to do is under the modeling tab here, I'm going to click on a new what if parameter. And that'll open up a little dialog box here. So the first thing I'm going to do is enter in a name. I'm going to call this what if GDP. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to make this a percentage based. So I can say, oh, what if my GDP was only half of what it actually is, right? 50%. Or what if it's double, 200%? So for the data type, I'm going to select a decimal number. I'm going to have the minimum as 1%, and the maximum I'm going to do is 2%. I'm going to increment it by 1% increments, and I'm also going to put a default value of 0.01. So this will go and do a couple of things. Essentially, you're just interacting with a wizard. It will go and generate some DAX code that you could then can further refine and alter to meet your needs. So I'm going to click OK here. And you'll see it spin for a minute. And so now you see I have this new slicer with a whole bunch of values. It basically generated a bunch of data from 0.01 all the way to 1.99. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you what that data looks like. So it's created this table here, what if GDP, and I'm going to modify this so that it's formatted as a percentage. And I'm also going to only make it so that there's no decimal points afterwards. And just while I'm here too, I'll show you a little bit about the DAX code that was created. So the list of values, it's using this generate series to create basically a data set, this list of tables, these values that I need. And you can see I specified the starting point, the end point, and the increment. And there's another measure associated with this table called what if GDP value, and it's using the selected value. So selected value is a function in DAX that, if a single value is selected from this table, it will return that value. And if there's not a single row, it will return the default, which I said was 0.01. And we'll come back to this selected value because you can further use this to enhance your what if scenarios, and I'll show you how in a little bit. So I'll flip back to my report canvas now. And I'm gonna also change this so that it looks like a little bit easier to use, right? I'm gonna make it a single value, and I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller here. And maybe I'll just say, okay. So I now have a slicer that is, basically can be used for what if analysis, but it won't do anything yet. So you'll see that, as I change the values and say, well, what if my GDP is, 62%, nothing updates. And that's because I have to use the value that I've selected in this slicer for updating my calculations, updating my measures. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. So, you might recall that I started using a calculated measure metals by per GDP, right? So that's what I'm using on my chart here down below. So if I select that, you can see that this is the formula that I'm using. So, I'm basically going through every single row and dividing in this metal table and dividing the metal count by the GDP to get a value, and then I can aggregate it or do whatever I want to it. I need to modify this because I want to basically take my what if GDP value. So if it's, 100% or 50% or 200%, I want to multiply that selected value by the GDP value. So to do that, I'm going to modify the code just slightly here. And for the purposes of demoing, I'm just going to copy and paste this code here that I have. So all I did was added this multiplier, and I say, okay, well, take that GDP and multiply it by what was selected in that slicer. So again, that's either 0.01 for 1%, 0.5 for 50%, or 2 for 200%. So again, it's a way to increase or decrease my GDP. And then I can right away see, how the rankings update based on that. So I'll just click back outside of this editing box here. And now if I go and modify this slicer, you can see that my chart down below is changing. It's hard to see. And the reason why is because it's being applied to every single record. I'm not updating only one of these, I'm updating all of them. It's, across the board getting multiplied by, 1.5, for example, right? So you can't really see how different, gross domestic product is applied and how that might affect metal rankings without doing some further filtering, right? So I'm going to do that now because this is not very useful. This would only be really good if you want to, have something that applies to all rows essentially. And quite often that doesn't happen. Really when you're playing with what if analysis, you want to have it based on certain products or countries or areas, right? So I need to add a little bit more to this to get to that next level of analysis capabilities. So the first thing I'm going to do is drop on a new slicer. And I want to be able to modify the GDP for a selected country and see how it changes its ranking compared to other countries. So I added a new slicer here just by selecting this, and you can see it's not hooked up to any data yet. And I need this slicer to have a unique list of all the countries that have participated in the Winter Olympics of 2018. So I don't want it to be connected to my medal table because, again, I only want it to apply, I have to use that selected value formula to go and selectively pick it. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. So, basically, I'm going to use this number of athletes by country because this has a unique list of all the countries that are participating and the number of athletes. And I'm going to pick that as my slicer here. And I'm going to change this so that it's a drop down. And I'm also going to allow it to be searchable to make it a little bit easier to work with. So now I have the country and the GDP here. And I'll just show you quickly for a minute too what that data set looks like, the country one. So it's floating out here. It's not connected to anything. And it has a set of values that look like this. So one row for every country, and I have this additional thing with the number of athletes. So I hooked up my slicer to that data set, but it's not going to change anything yet because there's no relationship. I'm not using that data in my formula for calculating the medals per GDP. So that's a pretty good hint on what I need to do next, and that is modify my medals per GDP DAX formula. So again, just to simplify the demo here, I'm going to copy and paste some code I have here, and I'll walk us through it kind of bit by bit and deconstruct it. So what this DAX does is the very first thing I have here is a variable, and I'm storing the country, and I'm basing that on what was selected from that data set. You remember that data set that had a list of all the countries with the number of athletes? I'm basically if a single country has been selected, so if I have picked something from the slicer, I'll use that value. Otherwise, I'm going to pass the default of all. So my country variable will be stored, and it will either contain the country that I've selected in the drop-down filter slicer, or it will have a value of all. Then what I do is I have an if then else logical conditional statement here. And the first thing I do is check to see, okay, does my variable contain the value of all? If it does, then I just use the same formula that I had before, where I basically apply the GDP to every single country, right? I take the medal count divided by the related GDP, and I times the selected value for the what if scenario. If it's not equal to all, which means I've picked some country, then I need to only apply that essentially multiplier of the GDP to that one country. So I basically modify the second half of that formula and do a check to see, hey, if the country is not all, so it's something, and if the country value is equal to the name of the country that's in the row, then I multiply it by the what if GDP value. Otherwise, I multiply it by 1. So basically, there is no alteration to the GDP. So if I have a match in terms of what I picked versus what is in there in the country record or in the medal table in the row for the country field, if that matches what I selected, then I will multiply the GDP by my what if value, which might be like 0.5% or 1% or 200%. So this basically drives the intelligence to say, okay, well, only apply this what if scenario to certain records. So I'll show you what that looks like now. So again, you'll see here, Canada, we're kind of, I don't know what place that is, 12th place in the list here. So if I want to just play around and see, okay, well, what if Canada actually had 50% of its GDP. I can move that around here. So now it's at 50%. So now you can see that, with regards to metals per volume of GDP, we're doing a lot better. We're getting, we're now in 4th place. And you can even start to play around and say, well, actually, at what point, do we rank better than the leader? So you can kind of play around with the slicer here, and you can see, okay, well, if I'm at 23%, I'm now in 2nd. Norway's still beating me. If I go down to 18%, I'm getting really close in terms of ranking. And if I get down to 17, now all of a sudden Canada is in the lead with regards to the number of metals compared to gross domestic product. So it's a really kind of neat way of playing around with data and seeing how things change based on different scenarios. And you still have all the same interactive capabilities, right? I still can go and select silver, gold, or bronze and see how the rankings change. I can double my GDP if I want to say, okay, what if I'm almost like 200%, right? Whereas Canada now, it's pretty far down the list somewhere. But it's a really nice way of playing with data and allowing an average business user to see how the results change based on criteria that you've defined. And I'll just maybe further explain this a little bit more just so everybody's clear too. So again, the real kind of magic is the fact that I've modified my metals per GDP and essentially determined what was the country that they picked. And that was based on what they've selected from this slicer. And this slicer is sourcing its data from the country field from this data set. And then the other thing I'm doing is determining, okay, if something has been selected, then only apply that what if GDP value, which you can see here, to the country that was selected. Otherwise, just multiply it by 1, which basically means, keep it the same, right? Don't change the GDP. So, the cool thing with this is, you can do this with, the out-of-the-box visualizations in Power BI. So I'm using the chart, which is out of the box, right? I can publish this, I can consume this, but you can even do some more sophisticated things. And for that, I'm just going to flip over to another Power BI report here that I've previously built. So in this report, I have I'm using what if GDP, also what if population. So you can kind of play around with, okay, what if we produce more product, or what if we have less population? How does that affect different countries' rankings with regards to the number of metals? And I'm actually passing the data into R and then using ggplot to create this visualization. So I'm using some, you can see that there's 3 charts here, each showing metals per million people along the y-axis, and then metals per GDP along the x-axis. And I've done some faceting so you can see, compare bronze, gold to silver. And so I can do things, you can see that, maybe I'll just zoom in here so you can take a closer look. Canada's kind of in the middle with regards to gold, like the gold and the bronze, right? And also the other one. And if, again, I go and select Canada, and I say, okay, what if our GDP is 0.5, and you can see that the wheel is spinning here because it's replotting this data. And you can see that Canada's moved out of the pack a little bit. And what if my population is also way less? And so now you can see, I'll zoom in again. Canada is now really kind of in the leaders quadrant, I guess you could say, with regards to the metal counts when compared to GDP and to overall population of the country. So it's a really cool way if the out-of-the-box visualizations are not meeting your needs, you can still use R and still integrate these what-if scenarios to really help explain how the data is today and how it could be based on changes. And one more cool thing, and maybe I'll just flip up the code for a minute too before I move off of this. So essentially, I'm using ggplot, and I'm calculating the metals per GDP, metals per population, and I'm putting it on a logarithmic scale just to make it a little bit easier to visualize, right? And then I'm plotting that data and using the different functions in R to create the visual that I want, because you have a lot of control with the way things are visualized when you use R. So it's a very actually short R script, nothing complicated. And if you want to use R in Power BI, you just have to make sure it's installed and that the Power BI product can access it. And I'm going to show you one more example of integrating what if parameters with R. This one's a little bit more sophisticated. And so again, we have what if with predictions now. So the red bars along the bottom are the actual metal counts, and then the blue is the predicted metal counts. So it's the same concept where you can go and modify data and see how it changes. So I can select Canada and see how that changes. And for this one, and actually I should maybe open up the fields too for a minute just so you can see. So I dropped in this visual down below with the ggplot, that's using an R script visual. And I've passed in the country, metal count, the what if GDP and the what if pop values from this one table into that R script. And then I'm, again, same idea, calculating the GDP, calculating the pop or metals per pop. And I'm using a linear regression model here to go and create a prediction based on the what if data. Now, the only caveat with this one, I haven't had time yet to take it to the next level, but right now when you go and pass it data, it is doing predictions for every single country, like repredicting. I need to modify the R script a little further if I want to say, okay, well, show me the what if actuals and the predictions, and only update the predictions for the country I've selected. If you wanted to do that, you'd have to modify where the predicted is applied, the predicted values. Right now, everything's getting recalculated. But again, it's a very interesting way that you can start to integrate what if along with predictive modeling to really extend what you can do and really kind of twist the bounds of what's possible with regards to what if predictions and or what if scenarios and predictive capabilities. So it's a very powerful way to start to take your capabilities to the next level. And and again, for this data set, it's the same idea where I have for the GDP, same formula that you've seen before. And for the population, it's the same idea too, where it's like, okay, take what was selected and go and calculate the population based on what was selected. So you can compare number of metals versus population and number of metals versus gross domestic product. And so that pretty much covers it for the demo. Were there any questions before I move off the demo and wrap up with some slides?
I haven't seen anything coming yet. I guess we can just press on.
All right, sounds good. So, just to recap, the first thing I showed you was changing the measure on the graph, right? Going from number of metals to metals per GDP. Then I created a new parameter, new what if parameter. And as we saw, that generated some DAX code that I could then further modify. I modified that generated data set so that it looks like a percentage, and I removed the double precision point, so it's only a single value. And then I changed the slicer so that it looked like a single value rather than like a list. I modified the existing measure to, include the what if GDP factor and multiply that by the selected GDP. And then I also added a country slicer, and then I further modified that measure to only apply that GDP to the selected country. And then in the end, I just showed you how you could also pass that data into an R script and plot it using ggplot, or you can use any of the plotting capabilities in R. And you can even, as I mentioned, integrate that data into predictive modeling. I use simple linear regression, but again, you could extend that and integrate it into any other kind of machine learning algorithm that's available in R. And one thing I should mention too is that, the nice thing is with SQL Server 2016 and above, you can put that R code into SQL Server, and then you can have it centrally managed and have your models managed inside SQL Server. And then you can wrap that inside a Transact SQL package and have Power BI call that package with certain values and then update. So that will kind of, if you are ever in the scenario where you need to do Power BI embedded, that's R is not available with that. So a way around that is to start to use like a personal gateway or enterprise gateway and access SQL Server and have the R code run within inside SQL Server. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I had to demo today. Again, I want to kind of keep it focused. If you want to contact me, you can email me. I'm also on LinkedIn. And so the demo I showed you today, it's available as a blog series. So, look me up on LinkedIn. You'll see a Olympics series of articles where I kind of go step by step and basically take you to that point where you have like an R script along with what if scenarios all kind of integrated. And I also I'm on Twitter, so you can look me up on Twitter and make announcements and post ideas and musings on there. So that's it for me.
Hi, Anthony. Would you be able to send me the slides so I can post it on our website? That way people can just copy and paste, say like your contact information or something instead of, have to type it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And
Uh,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I saw just this one question is can Power BI work with Python script?
At this point, no, not out of the box. So if you want to use Python, you'd have to put that inside SQL Server. As of 2017 and above, there's the machine learning service, which can run Python code. And then you'd have to wrap that around some Transact SQL. So you'd basically have Power BI connected to SQL Server to a table valued function, and that would go and execute Transact SQL, which would go and execute your Python code and return a table set back to Power BI.
So performance-wise, if we do it that way, would that be slower?
Well, all of the I'm assuming you want to use Python for like your machine learning or deep learning, and that would actually be running on the server. So it would
Oh,
actually be very
fa
as
fast.
fast as your server is essentially, right? So.
Okay, makes
And
sense.
only, yeah, so basically what would happen is, when you hit the refresh button in Power BI, it would go and execute that function that's inside SQL Server, which would then execute the Python code to do, scoring or predictive modeling against, and then it would return the results, and that would go back, up to through the SQL Server, through the gateway, up to Power BI.
Your Olympic data, will they available on your blog? Or
Yeah, it's just from Wikipedia, or yeah, Wikipedia. So again,
okay.
in the blog post, I specify the URL I use, but it's just publicly available data that I grabbed from Wikipedia,
hmm
so anybody can go and get it.
Okay, if they visit your blog, part can, follow over there and reproduce what you've done.
Yeah, correct. Step by step, no problem.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much, Anthony.
You're welcome.
I think that's all we got in terms of questions. As I mentioned before, this session is recorded and I will post them on the YouTube tomorrow. Anthony, if you send me the slides, I'll post it on our website so that people can, connect with you if they have more questions and visit
Absolutely.
your blog. Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay. Cool. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you so much, Anthony, for this demo heavy presentation. I really like it and learn a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody. See you next session. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.